What is up, y'all? Kevin Kuhn here from Athlete Factors. This is the Athlete Factors podcast, and I'm here with probably the best roommate I've ever had.
Best and worst.
Not worst. Definitely not worst.
Oh man, that's a rough roommate right
Joshua Mohler. Josh, how's it going?
Going good. Good day today.
Yes. It's a little overcast and a little rainy here in Dallas. How's the weather in Austin?
We had a storm this morning, but it's bright and shiny now. I'm looking out my like panoramic windows, and it's just beautiful out. Good
Nice. Day. Excellent. So, you and I were roommates, freshman and sophomore years of college at Cedarville University.
That's right.
We met the previous summer
Mm-hmm.
at good old summer studies.
Knew each other. What? That's 11 years? 12 years?
It's a long time.
It's crazy.
Yeah. So at the time, I don't even know if we had talked about our majors, and then we ended up kind of doing the same thing. So funny how life works out.
Well, I started off as a nursing major and then went to training for a couple of years. So it took me a while to get to where you were. You're just so far ahead, Kevin. I
kind of had an idea of what I wanted to do from the get-go.
Yeah.
So that, and I don't think I knew that you could like change majors. Like I knew that people did that, but I wasn't sure like I could do that.
Right.
So I was like, oh, I already picked. I guess
this is what I'm doing.
This is, yeah. So, but no, I kind of had an idea of what I was going to do, sort of, in a roundabout sort of way. So, But yeah, I remember freshman year you were working on, was it like EMT classes or?
Yeah.
And so.
Just developed from there. Kind of I realized nursing was not where I wanted to be. Athletic training hours are horrible. So I ended up actually, after graduating exercise physiology, in cardiac rehab. So I was doing like post-surgical rehab for 10 years, which makes me feel really old. But then finally a year ago transitioned. This is like a backward step for a lot of people, but now I'm working as a personal trainer in a gym, managing, operating a gym here in Austin. So it's an opportunity to present itself, and it's impossible to say no to. And it's been a really cool experience.
That's awesome. So yeah, like you said, a lot of people would view that as a step backwards, but if you're stepping into a position where you get to kind of run the show, then that's that's definitely not a backward step. So in the personal training industry, where just about anywhere you start, you're going to be on the bottom rung with very, very limited advancement potential. The profession of personal trainer for most people is a very temporary thing, just because it's
just a stepping stone to get somewhere else. But not a lot of people understand that if you do it right, it can definitely be a permanent and a smart move to make.
For sure. Yeah. It's nice. One of the pros of being a personal trainer that a lot of people kind of, when you're starting out, it's not a pro. It's very much a con. Your schedule stinks.
Yeah.
Like, it's not fun, because if you're just starting out, then you get all the hours that nobody else wants. So you usually work a split shift, maybe even 3 shifts, and that stinks. But like once you're pretty well established, then you get to pick your schedule, which is really, really nice. So
my schedule was fantastic, but then COVID hit, and 6:30 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. today, just with people gapped out all the way through. So I've got plenty of paperwork and other stuff to do, but it's been a challenge.
A little slow.
Yeah.
I know how that is. So tell us a little bit about yourself as far as academics. We kind of covered that a little bit, but you can get into that a little bit more. Athletics, and also kind of what you're doing now professionally in a little more detail.
So like you said, I was at Cedarville, 4-year degree, exercise and sport science. Graduated with, I think, a psych minor. So that's, believe it or not, really helpful as a personal trainer too.
Mm-hmm.
To delve into, what's going on with people in their minds, because more than anything, people out here getting out aggression, and you're going to be getting into a little bit of their feelings and emotions too. And to be able to know how to handle that has been really helpful. And then, like I said, spent 10 years after graduating working in a hospital environment, clinical setting, in a hospital, even in like rehab clinics, doing post-surgical rehab, mostly for heart patients, everything from mechanical implanted hearts to heart transplants, to just stents, little tiny, barely even procedures.
Mm-hmm.
And that experience, I think, more than anything, set me up for watching healthy people work out. It's been really interesting, graduating from people who literally can't get out of bed to people who are squatting 600 pounds. It's such a big change. It's been really interesting trying to change that programming. I'm used to working with TheraBands and people being able to lift their own limbs, and now they're doing so much more. So I transitioned about a year ago, actually almost exactly a year ago. So June of last year, to working in it's actually a high intensity, like super slow gym here in Austin, kind of a boutique type place.
Mm-hmm.
Have 4 trainers here with us. And then we also have a rehab element and cryotherapy here. And it's been my goal is to build this up to a point where I can franchise it. So open up a second location and kind of build it up from there.
Nice.
That's where we're at.
Gotcha. So with all the variety in the fitness industry, let's say, where you can go to the extremes of powerlifting, right? You could go to like Westside Barbell in Columbus and train with Louis Simmons to just get maximal strength, or you can go to a boot camp where it's outdoors, there's no equipment, and everything is a little more plyometrically focused, or calisthenics. You've got everything in between, right? You've got water aerobics, you've got jazzercise, you've got curves, you've got CrossFit.
Yeah, it's crazy, the spectrum, and there's money for everything too.
For sure. So you mentioned a little bit about this being a high intensity, super slow training facility. So tell us a little bit about your experience with that type of modality, let's say, before you started working there.
Yeah.
And then you can kind of transition into.
Literally, I mean, even through a degree in exercise sports science, I had never heard of, walking into the doors of this place for an interview, never heard of super slow or high intensity strength training, or science-based training, some people call it when they're really into it. Had no idea what I was getting into. Walked through the door and I thought it was a scam, because the thing was, full body workout in 25 minutes or something like that. And I'm like, that's not possible. Like, you might be able to get a little bit of work done, but my interview literally consisted of a training session. So I sat down with the manager at the time, and after a regular interview, we went through and did, I think, 4 different exercises, and I was beat. And I mean, I've never been in fantastic shape, and that's just the way life goes. But I mean, it was a tough workout. I mean, after doing free weights for 6 months, I came in here and in 4 moves was toast.
Yeah.
And it was really strange to be in that environment where I had never heard of this, and yet it seemed like black magic a little bit.
Like pretty well established. And if it's so well established, then
exactly,
why wouldn't we know anything about it?
History is, I mean, back in '84 is when this really started to make a breakout. I mean, there's whispers of it before that, but they started doing like in-house studies. Basically, they would have laboratories set up and had people coming in and testing this, and they were actually taking measurable data, looking at strength and testing for osteoporosis and improving osteoporosis, which is the main intention of this initially. And then over time, it just developed into a very quick, very thorough way to work out.
Sweet.
Yeah.
So give us the basic gist of what is super slow training. Like, are we talking about just eccentric, isometric, concentric time limits, or like what all is involved?
So what we do here, and there's a book that we kind of base the general premise of our gym off of. It's called Renaissance of Exercise, and we have isometric exercises, but they're never high intensity. So you're not going to like blast out at 100% effort right out the gate. It's always in some form or fashion like slowly climbing up to 100% effort. But the majority of what we do is we call it a 10-10 cadence, which is a 10-second concentric and 10-second eccentric movement, which is a lot slower than you might realize.
20 full seconds for one rep.
Yeah. So it's a full set, if it's done right, is done in about a minute and a half to a minute and 40 seconds. And the goal is to have the weight heavy enough that in that time frame you reach muscle fatigue, and they call it momentary muscle fatigue. The other key thing along with going super slow is that you're not letting your muscles rest. So you're recruiting sequentially. That's the word. Sequentially recruiting muscle fibers, starting with slow twitch and leading up to fast twitch. And once you recruit those fast twitch muscles, your body starts kicking into like a fight or flight type mode, where it's releasing all these hormones, and they're bombarding your body saying, we need to stop this. Like, something's wrong. I can't beat whatever this is. To push through that. So people will either drop the weight and be done, or they'll kind of hulk up and like, the chest press, just
finish it out.
Yeah, it's like beat the machine.
Yeah.
And the goal is to kind of enter like a Zen mode and say, this is miserable, but the more I push into it, the more I can endure this pain and this fight or flight kind of panic, the stronger I'll be next time I come back. So my goal as a trainer is to get someone to reach that point of failure at about a minute and a half of that set. And then after that, we put the weights down and move on to the next machine. So it's one set. I mean, in most cases, one set and done.
So my first exposure to high intensity training, which came long before high intensity interval training, which a lot of people may not understand. There's a huge difference. Like, high intensity training is absolutely nothing at all in resemblance to high intensity interval training, right? So my first exposure to high intensity training, I think, was maybe 2010, 2011, when I heard this concept going around, and it had been around long before that, but that's when I was first exposed to it. And it was essentially you get to the point where let's say you're going to squat, and you're just going to squat. I forgot what the specifics were, but it was maybe around 70 to 80% of your predicted 1RM or your tested 1RM. And then you're going to get as many reps of that as you can. And when you fail, then you're done with that exercise, and you don't revisit that exercise again until you're not sore. So the idea was, for people who had never done it, they're like, well, I can do one set to failure, and then I won't be sore. So I can do another set. But it's like, yeah, but that's different, because you have to be so keyed in for that one singular set that you're actually working to fatigue. Right.
Yeah. What I tell people, it's usually the time where you would quit in a normal gym environment, we're pushing at least 30 seconds past that. A lot of times, if people aren't able to get past that point, like to say, oh, no, I'm done, and I can tell they're not done, I will help them with the concentric, make it centric.
Make them lower it, yeah.
And help them get to fatigue that way, because once they can't hold that weight up anymore, then they know that they've hit fatigue.
Yeah.
Or we'll end in isometric and just have them hold the weight. Say, okay, hold it right there, don't move for 10 seconds. You're gonna hit failure doing it that way.
Oh yeah.
You're digging so deep that if you're not sore for at least 2 days afterwards, you've done it wrong.
Yeah, I think the idea seems so simple and so basic for people who've never tried anything like that they're like, that's easy. That doesn't make any sense why it would be helpful, because one set of anything is a waste of time. Like if you look at research on power output, that in Olympic lifting, like that may not happen until the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th set. Like this is such a waste of time to do one set, but there's a whole lot of variables that aren't being considered here, like time under tension. If your entire goal is to increase strength, not maximal strength, where you're the risk to reward ratio when you're looking at increasing strength is you can get really strong without having to work anywhere remotely close to your 1RM. And then your risk for injury is much, much lower. So for, most people who aren't training to do something at max effort, like a power lifter or Highland Games or strongman or anything like that, there's not as much reward for lifting close to that 1RM. So
for the average person, there's no reason to push yourself to that point, especially if you're not ever going to in life need to hit that point. So to take a reduced weight and take that to failure, and this is just trying to find the fastest way to get your body to failure at a lighter weight, that's simply what we're doing here. Not allowing that muscle to rest, and so we're getting you to failure as quick as we can. So you benefit of that muscle failure without the risk of the heavy weight.
Yeah, I think like that cannot be overstated how much safer it is, even though it feels probably when you're about to fatigue like this is very unsafe. But it's like
the part is, once you're so close to fatigue, it doesn't matter how hard you push. You can give 100% effort. You can act like a power lifter and try to drive that weight, and the muscle is just so far fatigued that you don't have enough power to hurt yourself. So dead, and I'm trying to curl 50 pounds. It doesn't matter, how hard I try to curl those 50 pounds, I'm fine. Yeah. And everything we do here is machine based for the most part. So even if I drop the weight, it's not going to lay my foot, so I can't even break a toe doing this kind of exercise.
Gotcha. So
very safe.
I know one of the fathers of this movement is the guy who started Nautilus. So do you guys use Nautilus equipment?
So we use a branch of Nautilus called MedX, and it's the same guy in the lab. It was Nautilus equipment, but they, like I said, took it into a laboratory and started doing testing. So this was their official testing equipment, nice. Medical exercise, MedX. So yeah, we do use that branch of equipment, and something else that's another iteration beyond that called Renaissance Exercise or RenX equipment.
Nice.
Yeah, so it's all the true form, like back from the 1990s equipment sitting in here. Still gets the job done for sure.
Gotcha. So here's where I think it's really important to distinguish what we've touched on a little bit, but let's go a little bit deeper. Where is the practical application here? So who's this going to be best for?
So this is best for, like you mentioned, first and foremost, for people who are not trying to work or have strength at peak performance. So I'm not trying to break any world records. I'm not trying to explode out of the blocks. And that's, we can get into a little bit, but this in sport specific training might be a different thing. But this is ideal for your average person who wants to be fit, wants to be healthy, and especially the average person who doesn't have time to spend an hour and a half in the gym, 3 to 5 times a week. So like you said, you're not going to work out that muscle group until you're not sore again. So most of our people are just coming in here twice a week. So we're doing a full body workout and then waiting 2 to 3 days until they're recovered, and then doing the same thing over again. So we're kind of waiting for full recovery before you try to fatigue those muscles all over again. So people who don't have time are typically people that enjoy and get the most benefit out of this kind of exercise.
Gotcha. So because of the muscle principle of said specific adaptations to impose demands, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like doing this type of training is probably not going to help your vertical jump or your.
So personally, we have a mat here where you can jump and it measures time vertical.
Mm-hmm.
And my vertical after having done this for 4 months, 5 months was terrible. It's just, that's not what I'm focused on. If you're doing a super slow squat, taking 10 seconds to get to full extension, you're not going to be able to jump high. You'll have the strength to, the potential is, but like you said, the specific adaptation is not there.
Right.
So yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's something that if you're looking for explosive power, this is not the way to train it.
Mm-hmm. So I think mentioning that, like this, people tend to just get very, very like brand loyal to a specific type of exercise. And then the assumption is, oh, well, it's good for everything. Like I know a guy who all he does is like focus on mobility, and he says it's good for everything. It's like, well, no, it's not. Like if you just do powerlifting, that's great. That's going to increase your maximal strength. But I doubt it's going to make you faster than somebody in a 40-yard dash. Right. Like I or a 100-yard dash or whatever the case may be. There's specific adaptations based off the way that you're training. Like the body will respond to the stimulus that you put it through. So for people who want to increase strength, but who don't want to be in the gym forever, this sounds like a really good modality for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So most of the people that come through here, this is what they do for strength training, and then they'll have their own. They do running or cycling or some sort of cardio, and that's those two things combined kind of get them where they want to be physically. But to your point, people that are kind of stuck in like this is what I do and nothing else. Mm-hmm. So I mentioned a book, Renaissance of Exercise, and kind of what we follow here. The guy that wrote that book had a chapter. I think I told you this the other day on the phone. Had a chapter where he went through every type of exercise. Like he went through yoga, went through step aerobics, went through CrossFit, everything, and said why this super slow style exercise was superior and why you didn't need that other type of exercise. Like, literally name a style of exercise, and I can tell you what he says about it. Well, I can't tell it from memory, but I can find where he says this is,
here's why it sucks.
So much better than this, and this is why. Wow. And it's just crazy that people have, good for them, that much belief in something like this, but to not be able to expand the horizons. I actually listened on my way into work today, I listened to your first episode, and your whole concept, like taking all these parts of sports fitness and bringing them together. If you can't do that with one form of strength training, say that, this is just a piece of the puzzle. Mm-hmm. This is gets you, 100% of your ability exposed through this one type of training, then you need to open your mind, because there's so many things out there that might be equivalent, if not better.
Thank you for listening to that episode. I think I finally have one person who's listened to it. So episode 1 is probably my worst episode. So
it was short though, so it excels in some points.
It had to be, because I was like, I don't know what else to say, and I hope a year later things are a little bit better.
There you go. Well, I'll have to forward and listen to a recent one. I haven't been caught up. I've listened to like the ones that interesting titles. I'm like, oh, that's the one. I'm gonna listen to that one. So
good.
I'll have to go listen to last week's and see what you had to say.
Sweet. It was okay. It was all right. The ones where I'm solo, I don't think are as
It's not as
entertaining. Yeah. But I don't know. Some people might like that. I just feel like, got to keep the ball rolling.
And you're sitting there all day long listening to yourself in your head. You don't want to listen to yourself even more talking on your podcast.
That's true. That's very true. So one thing that you mentioned is viewing specific types of training as like pieces to the puzzle, or as I like to view them as tools in a toolbox, right? So when I'm focusing on improving the quality of my athletes, I want as robust a toolbox as possible, but not so big that I don't know how to use any of the tools that I have at my disposal. So I think early on in my career, I was very guilty of putting all of these different tools in my training and everything being too spread out or too random that everything looked cool. My clients enjoyed that type of training because it was always something different and was always challenging, but maybe there wasn't quite enough direction. I wasn't consistent enough with certain things to actually extract the value of some of those things. So in grad school, one of my mentors there, not a doctor yet. Wow. Going crazy here. Charlie Melton. He's the strength coach for Baylor men's basketball. And he developed this way of training that he called force velocity training, which is based off or 5-zone training, which he developed off of the force velocity curve, where he basically theorized that, hey, there's all these different muscle contraction styles, and if I'm not utilizing and training all of them, then there's aspects of muscle contraction and the nervous system that my athletes aren't going to be exposed to, so they won't be able to do certain things on the basketball court when they need to. So
with the need for that, they won't have that in their personal toolbox. They won't
exactly.
be able to pull out muscle contraction.
Yeah. So there's times where you need to increase maximal strength, and you need to exploit maximal strength on the basketball court, or not necessarily maximal strength, but closer to that end of the spectrum. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, like if you're jumping up for a ball, that's essentially plyometric. That's just body weight. So, but if you don't want to get pushed around on the court, then you can't just train plyometrics. You need to have a little mass. You need to be able to show that, you've got some strength. So you want to hit a lot of spots on that force velocity curve, not just one spot. So I think this high intensity training or this super slow training is on that force velocity curve. And so because of that, I think it's a really important tool or skill to know and understand so that it can be utilized to make athletes better. So it's not just for people who don't want to be in the gym for an hour and a half, and who only want to train twice a week. Like, yes, it's for them for sure. But I think there's definitely a time and place for athletes. And a lot of people are probably not going to like that because people don't want to train super slow. But I'll give you an example of how I use this sort of training. And it's not so much on the concentric muscle contraction, but when I'm reteaching or teaching someone for the first time how to squat, I'll have them in that eccentric phase as long as possible so that they get comfortable under load, lowering their body to the ground. So I think that's super helpful.
What I realized, so I got to the point with free weights, I was able to squat, I think, just short of 300 pounds, and then started learning about this style of exercise and went back out to the gym and said, okay, well, I'm going to take my free weights, my Olympic barbell set, and try to do a super slow squat. I just figured no big deal, right? Just go slower. And I had to bring it down, I think, to 75 pounds before I could complete a repetition.
Yeah.
And you don't realize, especially when you're down deep, how much momentum is driving what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
What you do with super slow is you remove momentum from the equation. Like, you're not able to skip past a weak spot. You're literally having to drive through that. Every single, point of that muscle in that contraction is being tested. And so there's no weak spots anymore because you're training them all up.
For sure.
But the downside was, after being in here and for 6 months training super slow, then going back to the gym trying to lift free weights, I didn't have any of those stabilization muscles anymore because I've been on closed chain machines for 6 months.
Yeah.
So muscles that I hadn't touched in 6 months were getting me, the main movers were moving no problem.
Mm-hmm.
Stabilize it after that was a pain. Like, muscles just weren't doing what they're supposed to do anymore.
They just weren't conditioned for that.
Yeah, no, that's like what it's. I mean, the same thing. Like, if you don't train those muscles, they're not going to do it. When you call them to, they're going to be like, no, this is not what we do. We hang out while the big ones move.
Exactly.
And enjoy it.
Yeah. That's too funny. But yeah, that's one of those things. If you're only on machines, then you're going to get really good at machines. If you're only on barbells, you're going to be good at barbells. If you're only training body weight, you're going to get really good at body weight. Like,
it's where the whole functional fitness movement came out. Like, well, let's do something that you do in life and mimic it and get strong that way.
Mm-hmm.
For people just wanting to be strong in everyday life, that totally makes sense. Now, to do that and decrease the risk of injury doing it, I think is the biggest problem, because it's the way we do things functionally is not necessarily the safest way to do them. I mean, the way people pick up something from the ground is not the way we were intended to pick up something from the ground. Bending over and trying to deadlift groceries rather than doing a squat. It's just our bodies don't function the way they're supposed to in a lot of cases.
Oh my goodness. That reminds me, in grad school, in a biomechanics class with my professor who had a PhD in biomechanics, he did not lift weights, but he liked to play golf. Mm-hmm. And he told the class, there's actually there's potential when it's actually better to deadlift something off the ground than to squat it. Like, there's one specific instance where there's a biomechanical advantage, but he couldn't really like explain it to us. He was just like, I know that the math exists and there's the physics, and so there's times where it's actually better to like curve your back and like pick a box up depending on like how close it is to you. And I'm just like, why don't you just move so that you're not so close to it or not so far away? And like, if you're going to deadlift, you'd want to be as close as possible to it. But like, it cracked me up, because I was like, okay, like I understand what he's saying. Like
there will be somewhere in your life where you'll have to pick something up like this, so you should probably train it. But
he wasn't even saying that.
Oh man, see, that just doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It's never going to be advantageous that way. It's just never going to happen.
I don't think there's a practical instance where that's the case. Like, there's times where I will deadlift something up off the ground because I like doing that more than I like squatting. So, But I'm still going to make sure that I'm not doing it in an unsafe way. Like, but if I'm picking up a box off the ground and it's a heavy box, I'm probably going to squat. Like, it's just the way it is. So,
I mean, if I got a pencil maybe 5 feet from me, I'll probably deadlift that. Just go for it,
Exactly. It's just easier. That comes down to like, what's more efficient in that time and in that place, because the body wants to do whatever's the most efficient. So if the body thinks, it's just going to be easier to just hinge from the hip and pick that up, then that's what your brain's going to tell you to do.
Right.
So
I wouldn't always trust that brain, though.
Hey, the brain's let me down a time or two. So I feel you there.
Yeah.
So this relates back to one of the questions that I sent you, but what are some more of the pros and cons to super slow training, as far as like if somebody who's never done it and they want to try it, what can they expect to be pros? What can they expect to be some cons?
Yeah, I mean, cons I already mentioned a little bit. Like you're not training necessarily functional stability type muscles, and you're not going to have explosive performance.
So you'd want to be doing something else in conjunction with that?
I would recommend, yeah. So to train, if you are out there and doing, God forbid, CrossFit, and doing your kept-ups and all your Olympic lifts, then come here and train strength on a separate day, I think would be really advantageous. The benefit, the main pro, besides time, I think is the extremely low risk of injury. So a lot of my commerce, so I mentioned we have a cryotherapy machine. The main way I utilize that to drive business is people come in here with injuries from some other form of training. And I tell them, hey, come back here, let me train you once, I'll give you a free session, try it out. And as hard as they've been training, is as good of shape they're in, they're always blown away by how quickly I can make them fatigued. And it's, I mean, without fail, I've had, power lifters come in here and their bodies freak out because they're used to explosive movements, and you take away momentum and tell them to do a squat, they've got nothing.
Yeah. Oh, that was the other thing I was going to mention before, when you were talking about how when you're going 10 seconds and you're working through, essentially just about every muscle fiber, every motor unit is getting recruited. There's no stretch reflex. Like almost all athletic movements require the stretch reflex for power output, for rate of force development. Like you want to stretch the muscle and then it contracts, really forcefully. Yeah. And you're taking that completely out of the equation. Like that, it doesn't exist. So yeah, people who are used to training that stretch reflex, who bounce out of the bottom of a squat, for example.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was gonna say.
It's so not there.
By just like hitting down there and bouncing back up. That's we can't do that. So the biggest mistake people make at first is in what we call the turnaround. So when you hit the bottom of your phase and you're switching from eccentric to concentric, it's always a rush. People always speed back up because they're used to trying to gather the momentum and trying to use their force to their advantage and drive that weight. And to stop that pattern and say, no, you're just supposed to go the same speed the whole time. Barely let that weight touch, don't rush to the bottom, and keep right into going to the next movement. And especially, people who have trained in really any other kind of exercise struggle with that, because when you start to fatigue, especially, that's the easiest way to get the next rep out. If the goal is the next rep, then let me do whatever I can to recruit
just
whatever.
Muscle through it.
Yeah. So that's the thing I train people is, our goal here is not a certain number of reps. Like literally in my gym, I don't count reps. I don't care how many you're doing. What I'm looking for is time fatigue. And that's just because I'm the trainer. For the person training, I just want them to get to the point where they can't go anymore. It takes them 30 seconds or it takes them 5 minutes. The goal is to go until you literally fail. Like it's an interesting concept in a gym, because failure is absolutely what we're trying to do. Like most places, you don't want to fail in whatever you're doing. Failure is our objective. So you're striving to push yourself beyond what you can physically do.
Yeah, I think the idea of failure is an interesting concept in the fitness industry right now, because for the past few years it's been demonized completely, just because the thought was, at least for maximizing power output and perhaps even strength. Like if your whole goal is just to increase strength or increase power for like Olympic lifting, let's say, then you'd want to avoid fatigue as much as possible, because there's a point of diminishing returns, and the closer you get to fatigue, then the less you're actually benefiting from from your training. So,
Yeah.
but before that, it was extremely popular within the bodybuilding community to go to fatigue, because if you weren't training to fatigue, then you weren't going to get as big as possible. That was essentially the idea. So if you're leaving gas in the tank, then you're leaving muscle hypertrophy, out.
Yeah, you're not getting as big as you can if you're not pushing as far as you can.
Yeah. And I think there's a shift away from that now. I've seen a few pretty influential people in the industry talk about how, like there's, we shouldn't demonize anything completely. We should always figure out if there's any nuance, and there could be a time and a place for fatigue. Like in athletics, we train to fatigue pretty often. Like when I was running, we did workouts until you couldn't do it anymore.
The end of football practice back in high school, you do suicides. You run until you literally can't run anymore, and then you're done. And then the next time you come back, you can do one extra
another rep.
It should be able to do more and more every single time.
Mm-hmm.
I think if you're not, and to clarify, so I cut people off either at fatigue or at breaking form. So if someone is trying to do something like basically a cheat, if they're trying to cheat that weight up, that's the end, because then you're no longer training the muscle that you're attempting to train. And that's increases risk of injury exponentially at that point. If I'm doing a bicep curl and I'm leaning back and pulling and shrugging my shoulders, I'm not working my biceps anymore, or very am I working on. But it's important to know what your goals are and understand, like you said, to don't write it off just because it's something that you think is bad.
Because like fatigue could be a lot of different things. I mean, like in grad school, we talked about what causes fatigue, and it could be peripheral nervous system fatiguing. It could be the central nervous system fatiguing. It could be an issue with delivery of ATP or glucose or whatever energy system that you're utilizing. Or it could be all mental. It could just be the body doesn't want to experience any more pain. So
I had that conversation with one of my clients today because he has a recurring shoulder injury. And it's something that on an overhead press, like I can just tell mentally he gives up. And it's his fatigue point, because as much as he tries, he can't push anymore. But it is his brain telling his body to stop because he's at risk of hurting that shoulder. And so there's a lot of instances where people are not discovering their full potential because they're worried about an injury. And even if it's an injury that's 6 years old and it's healed, it's been taken care of, their body is still trying to protect that spot because it still feels it's weak.
For sure, yeah. The mind can have a pretty strong memory when it comes to injury, and sometimes it doesn't want to let go. Yeah.
People that come in here and like struggle with activating their pecs, because I've seen it enough. I'm like, have you had any chest surgery? You had breast implants or whatever? And like, oh yeah, like that's what it is. I can almost guarantee your body at that time shut down and didn't want to use that muscle because it was trying to protect your chest. To try to do isolation movements and try to activate those muscles again is a struggle. It's a long road, but that's what we started doing. Finding out muscles that aren't functioning properly and isolating them, and then trying to use them in compound movements after that.
That's the goal. Turn them on, and then use them.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, let's transition away from that a little bit. If somebody's watching or listening right now and they're like, "Hey, I live in Austin. How do they find you? How do they get a session with you?"
Yeah. Easiest way is to check out our website, Intense22 Fitness. I don't think I ever mentioned the name of the business. Intense22fitness.com. We also have Intense 360 Cryo, which is kind of our cryo branch. We're located in Westlake here in Austin, right off of 360 highway. But they can go to the website. There's plenty of ways to contact me there, or they can email me directly at josh@intense22fitness.com, or give me a call. All that stuff's on the website too.
Sweet. Awesome. And then if people want to follow, or do you have like Instagram or anything like that?
Instagram, we're at intense22fitness. We're on Facebook, same thing, intense22fitness. I have a Twitter, but I don't think anything is posted on it, nor do I really use it. There, if you want to follow me, go for it. There.
You got to have it, man. They say, build it and they will come, but I don't know if that applies.
Yeah, we're just waiting on the Twitter following to pop up out of nowhere.
I hear that. So I'll ask my last question, and then I want to share a funny story from our our good old roommate days.
Which one you're pulling back out?
So, what is something that everybody watching or listening needs to hear right now?
So I when you sent this email last night, I contemplated for a while, and I was talking about mine, and realized that the main takeaway, I think, for principle is consistency. That's one of the things, so just brag on you a little bit. I was reading through your book, and reading about nutrition and diet, and reading about different types of exercise and all sorts of things, realizing that without consistency, without keeping something up, you really benefit nothing. It doesn't matter what kind of exercise you do. I've been told there's no non-responder to exercise. So if you're doing some form of exercise, no matter what it is, you're going to get some benefit. Mm-hmm. If you don't continue that, if it's not a form of exercise you can't continue doing consistently, then there's really not going to be a lasting benefit. The same thing with diet. If you're not able to find a diet that you can follow consistently, then there's no purpose. It's short-term benefit, but long-term it's going to probably net you loss. So consistency, I think, is my biggest takeaway.
Perfect. I love it. You got to have it. Just it's one of those things. It's sometimes better to just stick with one thing, even if it's boring, but just commit to it, and you will see a change. There's times where when I bought my Airdyne bike, I was like, man, the people that I bought it from, I could tell never used it. It was maybe a year or two old. It was brand new.
Yeah.
They maybe had been on it twice. And I was like, man, if they had spent 5 minutes a day on this, just 5 minutes, that's nothing. 3 minutes, 1 minute a day, just 1 minute a day. That's nothing. But if they had just committed to just a little bit of time every day, they wouldn't have sold it to me, because they would have seen the benefit of it.
Right.
Yeah.
So
even if it's just one thing. I had on Dr. Jose Antonio a couple weeks ago, and his advice was pick one thing. And for our conversation, he mentioned, just for high school athletes, for high school endurance athletes, get a protein shake, have the protein shake every day. That's all you have to do, and you'll see a huge benefit. You'll see a big change from that. That's one thing. You don't have to change everything. You don't have to overhaul your diet. You don't have to overhaul your training.
The interesting thing to me is people always, when they get in phases of life when they're trying to improve, they change everything.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it so much harder to stick with that habit, because everything is different. I found when it comes to diet, to be able to say, pick this one thing and make it something similar to something you're already doing. If you can from, full sugar yogurt to high fat, lower sugar yogurt, just trying to change something to a healthier version of that same thing.
Yep.
And then slowly make those changes, you're going to be a lot more successful.
Couldn't agree more.
So, following your dietary principles, I've noticed, one, I told you this already, it's impossible to get enough protein. I've really been struggling with that. Potassium. So MyFitnessPal, I've had the hardest time getting anywhere near the right amount of potassium based on like daily recommended allowances. Any idea? Any nugget of wisdom?
I mean, you could pick. Sorry, my dog is napping right here. Can you hear him?
No.
He's like sleep barking.
Bring a little bit, yeah.
You could pick foods that are quote unquote high in potassium. You could get a potassium supplement.
Try that.
I would probably go with an electrolyte supplement.
Okay. So potassium supplements, I was reading up on it, like because there's risk of heart arrhythmias, they can't, like FDA says you can't have a certain number of milligrams of potassium.
Yep.
Trying to do like the natural, like I literally had a banana, sweet potato, spinach, salmon, tuna, all yesterday. and
Still couldn't hit it.
Potassium supplement. I took 2 potassium supplements. At the end of the day, 1,000 milligrams short. I'm like, what? Like, how is it possible?
You know what? That's an instance where you're way better off getting your blood work done to see if you're consistently or chronically low.
Yeah.
Because some people hold on to potassium better than others. Some people don't need to supplement as much. Some people don't need to supplement at all, and then other people need to supplement. Like it's similar to like the idea of vitamin D. Like some people are out in the sun enough and they never need to supplement.
Yeah.
And then if you live like in Ohio, then you
sun all the time, right?
Yeah. Like during the winter, you might need a supplement, so.
Yeah, and people think it's swimsuit weather.
Exactly.
Never forget that.
Yeah. That's one of the things about the electrolytes and micronutrients, like either getting blood work done or now you can do sweat tests and you can see like how much of the electrolytes am I losing. So it's one of those things, but I wouldn't personally, because I'm not a doctor, I can't like give medical advice. I can only give health and fitness advice, if you will. So that's a tough one. But from my perspective, based off what I know, I'm not even gonna say it because you know what? It's beyond my scope. I don't even know.
Talk to you later.
I would get your blood tested, get your sweat tested, see if you're actually losing a lot, and if you're chronically low, and then if you are, talk to your doctor.
All right, diagnosis from Dr. Kevin right there.
That's right. So, my story.
Yes, I'm so excited.
We probably talk about it like every single time we talk, but I mentioned at the beginning that you were the best roommate, and that's probably because we never had an argument, like not even once. Like we always got along. Like I can't think of a single time where I was ever even mad at you. Well, like not even once.
You white queso.
Yes, exactly. That's so
as long as I feed you queso, you were happy.
Yep. Yes. In fact, the one time, the only thing I could say that quote unquote bothered me, which it didn't even really bother me because it was so funny, was I'd have to wake up super early for morning runs because I was doing cross country. And, so I'd go to bed maybe at like 9:30, 10 o'clock because I'd have to be up at 5.
Right.
And, you'd come in the room. I was already in bed.
I was a normal college kid staying up until
exactly
Cedarville curfew of 10 o'clock.
Exactly. And you'd sit down, you'd open up your laptop, you'd turn on Family Guy, you'd warm up some queso, and I'd just be laying there trying to sleep. All the lights would be on, and I'm like, okay. So I'd like roll over, face the wall, and you'd come over and you'd open the window, which was right by my face, and then you'd rip my blanket off of me, and then you would open the refrigerator, like the little freezer area, scrape the ice off, and then throw that on me, and then throw the blanket back on top of me.
I just really wanted somebody to watch Family Guy with me. That's really all it was.
Yep.
And I had to go to those lengths just to sit there and watch the show. That's how sad I was.
Yeah. And I would crack up the entire time because of how ridiculous it was. It was so funny. And then I'd be like, okay, like, let's have some queso and
I feel
Family Guy.
Long term is that when I would throw the ice in your bed and you wouldn't find a piece and you just like have a wet spot to sleep in. I think 'cause the rest was easily changeable. You can close the window, whatever.
Yep.
Wet spot on the bed, you can't really fix that quickly.
No, that's true.
I'm sorry, Kevin. I'm so sorry.
It's all good. It's all good. It's not like I was that amazing of a runner and, that prevented me from pursuing my Olympic dreams. Like, it's no big deal.
Maybe second place was always my fault. It's because of late Family Guy nights that you were notorious for that. Always
one spot away from the win because of you.
I know. Holding you back. I'm sorry.
Well, it's too late to apologize. Can't take it back now.
I feel like that should be a song.
It should be. Somebody look into that. Alrighty, y'all. Well, thank you so much for your time, Josh. Really appreciate it. It's always good to catch up.
It's fun.
And next time I'm in Austin, I'll give this whole thing a little try.
See what it's like.
Yeah. I mean, I've done super slow eccentrics, but like I said, never the slow concentric. So, and like I said, when I teach people how to squat, like I'll set up a box and I'll have them hold a kettlebell. We'll do goblets. Maybe I'll have a band around their knees. And it's just like, hey, as long as you can physically take to get down to the bottom, that's how long I want it to take. And it always helps. It always helps their form. Like, it hasn't not helped yet. So I know there's going to be, some benefit to that, but that 10-second concentric after the eccentric just sounds rough. So
that concentric down deep in a squat, it burns so bad. Yeah, that's the worst.
I bet.
Yeah.
Anyway, y'all, give it a try. And if you have any questions, reach out to Josh. And
even so, people that aren't in the Austin area, if they reach out to me, again, Josh at 1022fitness.com, I'm happy to look up and find something. Like most of the facilities that do super slow have the same thing where they'll give you a free session. Mm-hmm. So email me and I can help you find some place to go give it a try too.
Perfect. All right, y'all. Well, you don't have any excuses not to try it. So give her a go. Yeah. All right, y'all. Thanks for watching and listening. Tune in next week for the next episode. We will see you then. Adios.
Bye.